The Bavarian village nestled amongst the pines. It was small and quaint. The scent of freshly baked bread usually filled the air. But there was another smell too. It was faint, like burning wood. It came from the workshop of old Heinrich, the doll maker.
Heinrich was a legend. He crafted dolls so lifelike they seemed to breathe. People whispered tales. They said his dolls had souls. No one dared to question him.
Heinrich was a solitary man. He lived alone on the edge of the village. He would only come into town to trade his dolls for food and supplies. Parents would save for months to afford a doll for their child. They believed a doll from Heinrich brought good luck. But the dolls came with a warning: never leave them alone at night.
Heinrich's dolls were beautiful. They had porcelain faces painted with intricate detail. Their eyes gleamed with an unnatural light. Their hair was real, often braided with colorful ribbons. Each doll was unique, but all held the same unsettling gaze.
When Heinrich died, the village mourned. He was a solitary figure, yet his presence was felt by all. He left no will. His only living relative was a young woman named Greta. She was his niece, and she had never met him.
Greta lived in a bustling city far away. She worked in a library surrounded by books and silence. Greta was surprised to inherit her uncle's house. She traveled to the village. She was greeted with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension.
The villagers remembered her uncle's strange ways. They warned Greta to be careful. The house was old and creaky. The scent of wood and dust hung heavy in the air. Greta felt a chill run down her spine as she stepped inside.
The house felt heavy, burdened by unseen secrets. The villagers helped her unload her belongings, their whispers following her into the house. "Be careful, Greta," they said. "Your uncle, he wasn't like us."
Greta tried to ignore them. She was determined to make this house her home. She spent days cleaning and unpacking. The house was surprisingly spacious. It was filled with antique furniture and strange trinkets. It was as if time had stood still within its walls.
One evening, as Greta was exploring the attic, she stumbled upon a hidden room. She had been up there countless times before, but this time something felt different, almost as if the attic itself was guiding her to a secret long forgotten. The door was concealed behind a tapestry, an old dusty piece of fabric that seemed out of place among the other items. It was locked, but the wood around the handle was splintered with age, suggesting it hadn't been opened in decades, maybe even longer. With a bit of effort, Greta managed to pry it open. The door creaked loudly, as if protesting against being disturbed after so many years of silence.
The room was small and dusty, filled with cobwebs that hung like ghostly curtains in the corners. A single window cast a dim light on the objects within, illuminating the room just enough to reveal its secrets. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and something else, something faintly sweet and metallic, a scent that seemed to whisper of forgotten times and hidden stories. Greta's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in the silent room. She felt a sense of dread creep over her, a feeling that she was not alone, that the room held more than just inanimate objects.
In the center of the room stood a wooden table, its surface covered in a thin layer of dust. On it lay an open journal, its pages filled with Heinrich's neat handwriting, each word meticulously penned. Next to the journal lay a wooden box, its lid slightly ajar, as if inviting her to look inside. Greta cautiously approached the table, her eyes fixed on the open book, curiosity battling with fear.
She picked up the journal, feeling the weight of its history in her hands. The pages crackled under her touch, each one a fragile link to the past. The ink was faded, but she could still make out the words, each one a piece of a puzzle she was determined to solve. They were written in German, her uncle's native tongue, a language she had learned as a child but rarely used. As Greta began to read, a shiver ran down her spine, the words revealing secrets she was not prepared to uncover. The words swam before her eyes, each sentence more disturbing than the last. They painted a picture so horrifying, so unbelievable that she almost dropped the book. Her mind raced, trying to comprehend the gravity of what she had just read, the hidden truths that had been buried for so long. Greta slammed the journal shut, her stomach churning. The words she had just read echoed in her mind, each sentence more disturbing than the last. She couldn't believe what she was reading. It was as if the journal was a portal to a nightmare she couldn't escape. It was madness, the ramblings of a disturbed mind. The handwriting grew more frantic with each page, the words more desperate. But deep down, a part of her knew it was true. The eerie feeling that had been gnawing at her for weeks now had a name, a face, and a terrifying reality. The dolls, with their unnervingly lifelike eyes, were proof enough. Each one seemed to hold a secret, a story of its own. That night, Greta couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with thoughts of the journal and the dolls, each one more unsettling than the last. She lay in bed, listening to the creaking of the old house. Every sound seemed amplified, every noise a potential threat. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. It was as if the house itself was alive, reacting to her fear. Every shadow seemed to writhe, every creak of the floorboard sounded like footsteps. She felt as if she was being watched, as if the house was filled with unseen eyes. Then she heard it, a soft, childlike giggle coming from downstairs. Greta's blood ran cold. It was a sound that didn't belong in the dead of night. She grabbed the oil lamp from her bedside table and crept towards the sound. Each step was a battle against the fear that threatened to paralyze her. It was coming from the living room, where she had left some of the dolls. The room seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, the air thick with tension. As she peeked through the doorway, her heart leapt into her throat. The sight before her was something out of a nightmare. The dolls were no longer in their places. They were scattered around the room, as if they had been moving on their own. They were scattered around the room, their porcelain faces illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the window. And they were moving. Their movements were slow, deliberate, almost human. Their limbs twitched, their heads turned, their eyes followed her every move. It was as if they were alive, each one possessed by a malevolent spirit. Greta's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to obey. Fear threatened to consume her, but she couldn't give in. She had to find the strength to face whatever was happening. She had to do something. She couldn't let the fear control her. She had to find a way to stop this nightmare. These were not just dolls. They were something far more sinister, something that defied explanation. They were trapped souls, victims of Heinrich's dark obsession. Each doll was a prison, each one a testament to his twisted experiments, and she was the only one who could help them. She had to find a way to free the souls trapped within the dolls and put an end to Heinrich's dark legacy once and for all. Greta spent the next few days researching everything she could find about her uncle's dark pact. She knew that understanding the depth of his actions was crucial to finding a solution. The more she delved into the past, the more she realized how intertwined her fate was with his. She scoured the library, poring over ancient texts and forgotten lore. Each book she opened seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle, but never the complete picture. The cryptic nature of the texts only added to her frustration, yet she pressed on, driven by a sense of duty and desperation. She consulted with the village elders, who reluctantly shared their fragmented knowledge of the spirit world. Their stories were filled with warnings and omens, painting a picture of a world where the line between the living and the dead was perilously thin. The more she learned, the more daunting the task seemed. The weight of the responsibility began to press down on her, but she knew she couldn't give up. The lives of the trapped souls depended on her perseverance. The ritual Heinrich had performed was ancient and powerful. It was a binding spell, one that tied the spirits to the dolls with unbreakable chains. The complexity of the ritual was staggering, and Greta realized that undoing it would be no simple feat. Breaking it would require a sacrifice, a token of pure intent offered under the light of the full moon. The specifics of the sacrifice were unclear, but the texts hinted at something deeply personal and meaningful. But what could she offer? What in her life held enough significance to counteract the dark magic her uncle had unleashed? She pondered over various objects, each one holding memories and emotions, but none seemed powerful enough. What sacrifice would be great enough to appease the spirit and free the trapped souls? The answer eluded her, and the pressure of time weighed heavily on her mind. Days turned into nights as Greta tirelessly searched for answers. Her once orderly study became a chaotic mess of books, notes, and candles burning at all hours. Sleep became a distant memory as she pushed herself to the brink of exhaustion. The dolls grew bolder, their movements more lifelike with each passing hour. It was as if they were feeding off her energy, growing stronger as she grew weaker. They whispered to her in the dead of night, their voices a chorus of sorrow and despair. The whispers were relentless, filling her dreams and waking moments with their haunting pleas. They pleaded with her to break the curse, to release them from their prison of wood and porcelain. Their sad, lifelike eyes seemed to follow her every move, a constant reminder of the urgency of her mission. Their pleas fueled her determination. She couldn't ignore their suffering, and she vowed to find a way to set them free, no matter the cost. She wouldn't let them down. The thought of failure was unbearable, and she steeled herself for the challenges ahead. She had to find a way to help them, even if it meant putting herself in danger. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but she was ready to face it head-on. She had inherited more than just her uncle's house. She had inherited his sins. The weight of his actions now rested on her shoulders, and she was determined to make things right, and she was determined to atone for them. With a deep breath and a heart full of resolve, Greta prepared to face the darkness and bring light to the trapped souls.